We've been talking about the lost books of the Bible, and something that kind of struck me is Adam laments the changed condition, and Adam and Eve enter the cave of treasures. It says, but Adam and Eve wept for having come out of the garden, their first abode. And indeed, when Adam looked at his flesh that was altered, he wept bitterly, he and Eve, over what they had done. And they walked and went gently down into the cave of treasures. And as they came to it, Adam wept over himself and said to Eve, look at this cave that is to be our prison in this world, and a place of punishment. What is it compared with the garden, with its narrowness compared with the space of the other? What is this rock by the side of those groves? What is the gloom of this cavern compared with the light of the garden? What is this overhanging ledge of rocks to shelter us compared with the mercy of the Lord that overshadowed us? What is the soil of this cave compared with the garden land? This earth strewed with stones, and that planted with delicious fruit trees. And Adam said to Eve, look at thine eyes, and look at mine, which afore beheld angels in heaven, praising, and they too without ceasing. But now, we do not see as we did. Our eyes have become of flesh. They cannot see in like manner as they saw before. And Adam said again to Eve, what is our body today compared to what it was in former manner, in former days, when we dwelt in the garden? After this, Adam did not like to enter the cave under the overhanging rock, nor would he have ever entered it. But he bowed to God's orders. He said to himself, unless I enter the cave, I shall again be a transgressor. I think you can hear in the story the anguish in Adam and Eve's heart as they have to leave that place called the garden. And as I was looking at this week's Torah portion, there was lots of things, again, that I think many of you know. I think many of you are already aware that the book of Romans is connected to this week's Torah portion, where Paul says, be not ignorant of this mystery. And our brother Eddie always points out that whenever Paul says, be not ignorant, we typically are ignorant. In Romans chapter 11, Paul says, be not ignorant of this mystery, brethren. It's verse 25. For I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you be wise in your own conceit, that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles come in. I think most of you are familiar with this passage in that it is a prophecy from Genesis 48, verse 16. Romans 11, verse 25, Paul says that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles come in. Now, if you take this passage, take it back to the Greek, and then take the Greek back to the Hebrew will say, Melo hagoim, Melo Malay, let me see, what word, so feet, full, Malay. I was trying to think of the Hebrew word that you would know Malay comes from. Malay means to make full. And in this passage, you should have a reference back to Genesis, and I don't know how many of your Bibles have a reference back to Genesis in your notes. How many of your Bibles have in verse 25 a reference in the reference notes back to Genesis chapter 48? So you know how you look up verse 25, and then verse 25 will have a bunch of other references to it. How many of your Bibles have a reference back to Genesis 48? Well, there should be a reference back to Genesis 48, verse 16, because in Hebrew, it says there that Ephraim and Manasseh would be the fullness of the Gentiles. How many of you are familiar with the Hebrew word dag, dagah, dagah or dag? Dag or dagah. Dag is the Hebrew word for fish. And in your English Bible, it doesn't read that way, but in the Hebrew Bible, it reads, "And may you become like a multitude," in the English, but in the Hebrew it says, "May you multiply like fish in the land." May you multiply like fish in the land. That's from Genesis 48, I believe, verse 16. Let's see, verse 16. "And the angel which redeemed me from all evil blessed the lads." I'm in Genesis 48:16. "And let my name be named on them, and the name of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth." Now in the Hebrew it doesn't say that. In the Hebrew it says, "May they grow like fish within the land." Therefore, we can understand when Yeshua said, "Come and follow me, and I will make you fishers of men," because Manasseh and Ephraim were called the fish that would multiply. They would become the fullness of the nations. They would become the fullness of the nations, Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim received the birthright blessing. How many of you know that Ephraim received the birthright blessing? Okay, just the majority of you know that Ephraim received the birthright blessing. In 1 Chronicles chapter 5, we are told that Judah received the scepter, but the birthright blessing was given to Ephraim. It starts off in verse 1, 1 Chronicles chapter 5. "The sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, he was the firstborn. But when he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was taken and given to the sons of Joseph, son of Israel, although not to receive the heredity of the firstborn. For Judah prevailed over his brothers, and the ruler was to come from him. But the firstborn's portion was Joseph's." So Joseph received the birthright blessing. And basically what that means is that Joseph would be the one who would proliferate and fill the nations with the children of Israel. So Joseph was the one who that birth